My husband forgot to buy my plane tickets to his sister's wedding in Santorini, even though I'd paid for the whole trip. Then he told me my hotel was missed too, and everyone else already had their plans set. I was the only one left out, quietly humiliated. I said it was fine, but that moment changed me for the next year. It's not personal, Riley. It's just blood family only. Nora's keeping it intimate. We were sitting in our car on a side street, snow falling outside, and my husband had just told me I wasn't going to his sister's wedding in Santorini. The wedding I'd spent hours planning travel for. The wedding I'd paid $7,500 to send his entire family to. Not personal. I repeated the words slowly like I was learning a foreign language. Alexander, we've been married for 12 years. I know, babe. He pinched the bridge of his nose. That gesture he always used when I was being difficult. But with the venue capacity and Thomas's family being traditional Greek Orthodox, they're being weird about the guest list. It's complicated. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories that matter. If you believe that trust and loyalty deserve respect in marriage, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. I stared at him through the dim interior of the car. This man I'd supported through law school. This man whose student loans I'd helped pay off. This man whose mother I'd endured every holiday. This man whose career I'd bankrolled while my little design hobby kept us afloat. Let me make sure I understand, I said, my voice deadly calm. I paid for your parents to go. I paid for your aunt to go. I paid for your cousin and his girlfriend to go. I paid for Nora and Thomas to go. I paid for you to go. I paused. But I'm not going. He sighed. I was going to tell you earlier, but the timing never felt right. And honestly, you've been so stressed lately. I thought maybe you'd appreciate a break. Some time to yourself. I'll book you a spa week. My treat. Spa week. His treat. With my money. That's when I started laughing and I couldn't stop. The sound came out sharp and wrong, echoing in the small space of the car. Alexander's face shifted from defensive to annoyed, then to something that might have been concern if I thought he was still capable of genuine concern for me. Riley, come on. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. That word landed like a slap. I'd just discovered I'd funded my own exclusion from a family event, and I was being dramatic. I needed to understand how we'd gotten here. How I'd ended up in this car, on this street, having this conversation that felt like it was happening to someone else. It had started 2 months ago, September. An ordinary Thursday morning. I'd been standing at our kitchen island, that expensive marble one Alexander insisted we buy even though I'd argued we couldn't afford it. It makes a statement, he'd said. Apparently the statement was that we had more money than sense, but I'd given in like I always did. I was drinking espresso, bitter and strong, scrolling through design mock-ups for a client when Alexander walked in, already absorbed in his phone. Nora finally set the date, he'd said without looking up. May. Santorini. Can you believe she's actually doing a destination wedding? I'd smiled, genuinely smiled. Nora was Alexander's younger sister, the free spirit who'd spent 3 years teaching English in Morocco and came back with stories that made our Chicago life feel ordinary and small. She deserved something extraordinary. That's incredible, I'd said, my mind already shifting into planning mode. A habit formed over 12 years of managing our household finances while Alexander's law career perpetually found its footing. Flights for 2, boutique hotel for 5 days, wedding gift, resort-appropriate wardrobe. Maybe $8,000 total. We should book early. May is peak season for the Greek islands. Actually, Alexander had said, and I remembered now how that single word had felt, like a small stone dropped into still water, creating ripples I hadn't understood yet. I was thinking you could handle the booking since you're better with travel logistics. I'm drowning at the firm right now. Partnership review is coming up. The partnership review. Always the partnership review year after year, carrot dangling just out of reach while I picked up every slack in our actual life. Of course, I'd said. Send me the details when you get them. He'd kissed my forehead, mechanical, distracted, and left for work. I'd gone back to my laptop and my freelance graphic design work, the little hobby that had paid for his bar exam prep course, his professional wardrobe, his networking dinners, and apparently now his family's Greek vacation. The weeks that followed had this dreamlike quality, like watching a movie where the soundtrack doesn't quite match the scenes. Nora sent a group email with resort options and flight suggestions. Alexander forwarded it to me with a one-line message. Asterisk, can you handle booking for us? Swamped. Asterisk. I'd spent hours researching. I found the Oasis Santorini, this boutique hotel perched on the caldera with infinity pools that seemed to pour directly into the Aegean. The photos showed sunset views that travel magazines called life-changing. I'd pictured us there, glasses of wine in hand, finally taking a breath together after months of his 70-hour weeks and my late-night design deadlines. Maybe this trip would recalibrate something in our marriage, I'd thought. Something that had felt slightly misaligned lately, though I couldn't name exactly what. Like a picture frame hanging just a degree off-center. Not obviously wrong but subtly bothering you every time you walked past it. In early October, Alexander had asked me to coordinate travel for his entire family as a favor to Nora, who was supposedly overwhelmed with wedding planning. So I'd booked flights for 7 people. His parents, Eleanor and Richard, his Aunt Patricia, his cousin James, Nora and her fiancé Thomas, and supposedly Alexander and me. I'd transferred $7,500 from our joint account. The confirmation email arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remembered hovering my finger over the confirm button, feeling something I couldn't quite identify. Unease maybe, or intuition trying to break through the noise of trust and habit. But Alexander was my husband, the man I'd built a life with, supported through every career setback and family obligation. I trusted him. I pressed confirm. The next morning, Alexander had thanked me without looking up from his case files. "You're a lifesaver. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words had felt cold even then. Transactional, like payment for services rendered rather than gratitude between partners. But I'd pushed the feeling aside, told myself I was being oversensitive, reading too much into tone and inflection. November came, Thanksgiving at his parents' house in Evanston, and I'd needed wine to get through it. Eleanor had been in rare form, making her usual passive-aggressive comments about my little design hobby, while somehow never acknowledging that my hobby paid for a significant portion of her son's lifestyle. I'd been refilling my glass in the kitchen when Nora found me, excited and slightly tipsy, loading turkey onto her plate. "I'm so excited you're coming to Santorini," she'd said. "It's going to be magical. Just family, you know. Intimate." "Alexander said you handled all the bookings." "Yeah, all set," I'd told her. 7 tickets, 7 hotel rooms. "It's going to be beautiful." That's when her fork had stopped moving. 7, but Riley, there are 8 of us. The marble countertop beneath my fingertips had suddenly felt ice cold. She'd counted on her fingers, and I'd felt something sharp and cold sliding between my ribs with each name. Mom, Dad, Aunt Patricia, James and his girlfriend Madison. They got serious over the summer, remember? Me and Thomas and you and Alexander. That's 8. 8 people. I'd booked 7. My laugh had sounded forced even to my own ears. I must have miscounted. I'll double-check the confirmations. But Nora's expression had shifted into something uncomfortable. "You're sure you're on there, right? Alexander was saying something to Mom last week about the guest list being tight." "Guest list." The words had come out sharper than I'd intended. "Nora, it's your wedding. I'm not a guest. I'm Alexander's wife." "Of course you are." She touched my arm, backtracking quickly. "I'm sure it's just a mix-up. Alex has been so scattered with everything at work." I'd excused myself to the bathroom and stood there for 10 minutes, breathing carefully, counting the small hexagonal tiles on the floor while trying to slow my racing heart. When I'd emerged, Alexander had been holding court in the living room, gesturing with his scotch glass while his father nodded along to some story about a difficult client. I'd asked quietly if we could talk. "Kind of in the middle of something, Riley. Can it wait?" It had waited, through dessert, through goodbyes, through the drive home with snow starting to fall and Alexander humming along to the radio like nothing was wrong, like his wife hadn't just discovered she'd been deliberately excluded from a family event she'd paid for. I'd waited until we were 10 minutes from our Lincoln Park apartment before I'd asked, calmly, "Curry, Nora said there are 8 people going to Santorini, Mom." He'd been checking his phone at a red light. "I booked 7 tickets. Did you, Alexander? Did you not give me your ticket information?" That's when he'd glanced at me, quick, guilty, calculating, and I'd known. Before he said a word, I'd known. And now here we were, pulled over on a side street with snow falling and my husband suggesting a spa week to make up for the fact that I'd paid $7,500 for a vacation I wasn't invited to. "Stop the car," I heard myself say through my laughter. "Riley, no. Stop laughing at me like I'm being unreasonable. Stop pinching your nose like I'm a difficult client. Stop acting like this is complicated when it's actually very simple." I turned to face him fully. "You deliberately excluded me from your sister's wedding. You let me plan everything, book everything, pay for everything, knowing the entire time that I wasn't going. That's not complicated, Alexander. That's cruel." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain it to me because I'm genuinely trying to understand how the man I've been married to for 12 years, the man whose career I've supported, whose family I've endured, whose life I've funded, how that man thinks it's acceptable to let his wife pay for a family vacation she's been excluded from. You're twisting this. I'm twisting nothing. I'm stating facts. My hands were shaking now and I couldn't tell if it was from cold or rage or the adrenaline of finally saying what I actually thought instead of swallowing it down. Answer me one question. When were you planning to tell me? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know. I kept thinking I'd find the right time, the right way to explain. There is no right way to explain this, Alexander. There's no explanation that makes this okay. You're being dramatic. I'm being dramatic? I reached for the door handle. I just found out my husband orchestrated my exclusion from his sister's wedding after I paid for his entire family to attend. I'm not being dramatic. I'm having a completely reasonable reaction to betrayal. Riley, don't. But I was already out of the car, snow immediately catching in my hair, cold air biting at my face. Behind me, I heard him call my name, but I was already walking, already pulling out my phone to text Claire. Asterisk, can you pick me up? I'll send you my location. I can't be in a car with him right now. Asterisk. Her response came back within seconds. Asterisk, on my way. Don't move. Asterisk. I stood under a streetlight, snow falling around me in fat, heavy flakes, and watched Alexander's car idle at the curb. He didn't get out, didn't come after me, just sat there for another minute before finally driving away, taillights disappearing into the snowy darkness. My whole body was shaking now. 12 years. 12 years of marriage, and I just discovered my husband was capable of this level of casual cruelty. This level of calculated deception. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice was already asking the question I wasn't ready to face. If he'd lied about this, what else had he lied about? Claire's headlights cut through the snow 20 minutes later, her Honda pulling up to the curb where I stood shivering under the streetlight. She didn't ask questions, just reached over and unlocked the passenger door. I climbed in, and the warmth of the heater hit my frozen face like a physical thing. Your place, I said. My voice sounded strange, flat and distant. She drove. We were halfway to her apartment in Wrigleyville before she finally spoke. What did he do? I told her. The whole thing spilled out in fragments. The Thanksgiving conversation with Nora, the car ride, Alexander's explanation about blood family and venue capacity, and how I'd appreciate a spa week as compensation for being excluded from a vacation I'd paid $7,500 for. Claire's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's not an oversight, Riley. That's deliberate. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend Alexander, to find the reasonable explanation that would make this make sense. But I couldn't. The numbers didn't lie. 7 tickets for 8 people. Months of planning where he'd let me coordinate everything, knowing I wouldn't be going. I just need a few days to think, I said. I can't be in that apartment with him right now. Stay as long as you need. Her guest room was small but comfortable, decorated in soft grays and whites. She brought me tea I didn't drink and a sandwich I couldn't eat. I sat on the bed with my laptop, opening our bank accounts, scrolling through months of transactions looking for something, anything, that would explain what was happening. The joint account showed the $7,500 transfer to the travel agency in October. Clear as day. $7,500 of my money, earned through late nights of design work, gone to pay for a trip I wasn't taking. I checked my email, found the confirmation from the Oasis Santorini. 7 guests, 7 rooms. The reservation was under my name since I'd made the booking. I'd even added the special requests. Ocean views for Eleanor and Richard, ground floor for Aunt Patricia's knee problems, connecting rooms for Nora and Thomas. I'd been so careful, so thorough, and the entire time Alexander had known. My phone buzzed. A text from him. Riley, come home. We need to talk about this like adults. I turned the phone face down and kept searching. That first night I barely slept. I lay in Claire's guest bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, my mind circling the same questions over and over. When did he decide to exclude me? Why did he let me book everything? How could someone do this to a person they supposedly loved? By morning I'd made a decision. If Alexander had lied about this, what else had he lied about? I needed to know. Claire left for work around 8, touching my shoulder gently. There's coffee in the kitchen. Help yourself to anything. I'll be back around 6. After she left, I sat on her couch wrapped in a blanket, laptop open, and did something I'd never done before. I logged into Alexander's email. We'd always shared passwords. One of those early marriage decisions made in a moment of trust and transparency. Married people don't have secrets, he'd said when we set it up years ago. I'd given him my passwords, he'd given me his, and we'd never thought about it again. The irony was about to become devastatingly clear. His inbox loaded. Thousands of messages, most work-related. I typed Santorini into the search bar and held my breath. The first result was an email thread between Alexander and his mother, dated August 15th, 3 months before Thanksgiving, 3 months before I'd found out. Eleanor, have you told Riley about the Santorini situation? Alexander, not yet. Trying to figure out the best way to approach it. Eleanor, Alexander, you can't just spring this on her last minute. It's cruel. My chest tightened. Eleanor knew. His mother had known for months. Alexander, it's Nora's wedding. She gets to decide who comes. Riley will understand. Eleanor, will she? You're asking your wife to pay for a family vacation she's not invited to. How is that fair? At least Eleanor had pushed back. That was something. Alexander, Mom, we've been through this. Riley's not technically family according to Nora's venue rules. It's blood relatives only. And honestly, Riley's been so clingy lately. Maybe some space would be good for us. I read that word 15 times. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of supporting his career, managing our household, enduring his family's passive aggression, funding his professional wardrobe and bar exam prep and networking dinners. 12 years of being the practical one, the responsible one, the one who kept everything running while he chased partnership. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely scroll, but I kept reading. I found another thread, this one between Alexander and Nora from September. Alexander, can you back me up on the venue capacity thing? Riley's going to be upset when she finds out. Nora, Alex, this is your mess. I never said partners weren't invited. This is your decision. Don't put this on me or Thomas's family. The room tilted. There was no venue capacity issue. No traditional Greek Orthodox restrictions. No complicated family dynamics. Alexander had simply decided I wasn't coming, then constructed an elaborate lie to make it seem like circumstances beyond his control. But why? What could possibly motivate someone to exclude their wife from a family wedding she'd paid for? I searched Vanessa in his email. Nothing significant. Tried his text messages. We had our phones synced to the same cloud account for sharing photos. That's when I found it. A message thread with a contact saved as VP. No name, just initials. But the messages made it clear who VP was. VP, so she actually paid for everyone's tickets? That's kind of brilliant. Alexander, I know. I feel bad, but this gives us the whole week. VP, 5 days in Santorini without her knowing. Alex, you're terrible. Alexander, you love it. Besides, what she doesn't know won't hurt her. And after, we can figure out the divorce situation. VP, you're really going to end it? Alexander, eventually, once I make partner. Can't afford the distraction of a messy divorce right now. Riley's useful for keeping my finances stable. I stopped breathing. There was more. So much more. Messages going back months, filled with details that painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see. Vanessa Pierce, a junior associate at Alexander's firm. 28 years old according to the firm website I pulled up with shaking fingers. Blonde, polished, ambitious. Everything I apparently wasn't. The texts continued and each one felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. Alexander, Riley's been so exhausting lately. Always asking about work, wanting to plan date nights. I can't deal with it right now. Vanessa, you deserve someone who understands your ambitions. Someone on your level. Alexander, exactly. You get it. You're sophisticated, driven. Riley's stuck in this freelance design thing. Doesn't understand what it takes to make partner. My freelance design thing that paid our mortgage for 6 months when he was between firms. My freelance design thing that covered his student loan payments. My freelance design thing that funded this entire conversation he was having with his mistress. I kept scrolling, each message worse than the last. They'd been seeing each other since March. 8 months. There were mentions of hotel rooms booked on nights Alexander claimed to be working late. Restaurants I recognized from our credit card statements. The charges he'd explained away as client dinners. And then the Santorini messages from October. Vanessa, I booked our room at the Oasis. Different name, different credit card. He'll never know. Alexander, perfect. 5 days in paradise while the family thinks we're just being responsible about room assignments. Vanessa, this is so wrong but so exciting. Alexander, what she doesn't know won't hurt her. And honestly, she'll probably be relieved to have a break from my family. Win-win. I sat there on Claire's couch at 2 in the morning, laptop screen glowing in the darkness, reading messages that systematically dismantled 12 years of my life. I wasn't invited to Santorini because Alexander needed me to pay for the family vacation he was using as cover to spend 5 days with his mistress. I'd paid for my own betrayal. The thing was, I didn't cry. I kept expecting the breakdown, the sobbing, the collapse into grief. But it didn't come. Instead, something else arrived. Something colder, clearer, fury. Not the hot, explosive kind. The cold, calculating kind that settles in your bones and sharpens your thinking. I opened a new folder on my laptop, started taking screenshots. Every email, every text message, every credit card charge that told a story. I documented the $7,500 transfer for the Santorini booking, found the separate reservation Alexander had made for himself and Vanessa, $3,200 charged to a credit card I didn't know he had. I built a timeline, March through November. 8 months of lies, itemized and dated. The sun was starting to come up when Claire found me, still on the couch, surrounded by printed pages, laptop open to a spreadsheet I'd created tracking every deception. Riley, her voice was careful. What are you doing? I looked up and something in my expression made her take a step back. I'm documenting, I said. My voice sounded different, harder. Alexander wants to take his mistress to Santorini on my dime? Fine, I'll let him. I'll pay for every moment of his vacation. Riley, and then, I continued, I'm going to make sure he pays for everything else. Claire sat down slowly on the other end of the couch. What are you planning? I looked at her, my best friend since college, the person who'd held my hand through every milestone and crisis of my adult life, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I'm going to give him exactly what he thinks he wants, I said, and then I'm going to take everything he thought was his. Claire was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe this version of me, cold, calculating, documenting betrayal with spreadsheets and timestamps, was someone new entirely. You're going to let him go? She asked slowly. You're going to let him take that trip with her? I'm going to let him think he's getting away with it, I corrected. There's a difference. I stayed at Claire's for 2 more days, perfecting my plan, organizing my evidence, making phone calls I never imagined I'd need to make. On the 3rd day I packed my things and went home. Our apartment was empty when I arrived just after noon. Alexander would be at work for hours still. I moved through the space like I was seeing it for the first time. The expensive furniture we couldn't really afford, the marble island that started this whole nightmare, the king bed we'd shared for 12 years that now felt contaminated by knowledge I couldn't unknow. I packed a bag with essentials and hid it in the back of our closet behind winter coats, documents, grandmother's jewelry, things I'd need but couldn't take yet without raising suspicion. Then I started cooking, salmon with lemon and dill, asparagus roasted with garlic, brown rice made exactly how he liked it, slightly sticky, his favorite meal, prepared with the same care I'd always given it, except this time every movement felt like I was playing a role in a play I hadn't auditioned for. I heard his keys in the door at 6:30, heard him stop in the entryway, probably seeing my shoes, my coat, processing that I was home. He came into the kitchen slowly, his expression a mixture of surprise and wariness. You're here. I turned from the stove, smiled at him. My face felt strange, muscles moving mechanically to create an expression that was supposed to resemble warmth but felt more like a mask I'd glued on. Where else would I be? I just thought, after the other night. He set down his briefcase, loosened his tie. I thought you might need more time. I overreacted. The lie tasted like metal. You were right, some time to myself might actually be nice. I've been wanting to work on that rebrand project for the Hayes account, and your family events are exhausting. The relief that flooded his face was almost pathetic, almost enough to make me feel something other than the cold fury that had taken up residence in my chest. Really? You're okay with it? I'm disappointed, I said, pouring him wine. A nice Pinot Noir we'd been saving, but I understand. Family dynamics are complicated. We ate dinner. I asked about his day at the firm. He talked about a difficult client, a brief that needed filing, office politics. I made the appropriate responses, nodded at the right moments, refilled his wine when the glass got low. All the while I watched him like I was studying a specimen under glass, cataloging behaviors, the way he checked his phone compulsively, the way his eyes slid away when I asked direct questions. The way he touched me, perfunctory, distracted like I was furniture he had to navigate around. How had I not seen it before? The weeks that followed became my masterclass in performance art. I played the role of supportive wife with a precision that surprised me. I asked about Nora's wedding plans, helped Alexander pick out an expensive set of luggage as a gift for the couple. When his phone buzzed with messages he didn't read in front of me, I pretended not to notice. But I noticed everything. Every time he claimed to be working late, I checked the location sharing on his phone, the feature he'd forgotten we'd set up years ago for safety. When it showed him at an apartment building in River North instead of his downtown office, I documented it. Date, time, duration. Every suspicious charge to our joint account went into my spreadsheet. The $180 dinner at Gibson's on a Thursday, he'd said he was working through dinner at the office. The $350 hotel room in Naperville during a weekend he'd claimed was a continuing education seminar. The $200 at a wine bar I'd never heard of. I cross-referenced everything with his calendar, his text messages, his explanations. Built a timeline that showed the gaps between what he said and what he actually did. In mid-December, during one of his late nights, I found an apartment. A studio in Wicker Park. Small but filled with light from enormous windows. The landlord showed me around, pointing out the updated kitchen, the original hardwood floors, the view of the tree-lined street below. "It's perfect," I said. "When would you want to move in?" I thought about the timeline. Alexander's flight to Santorini was May 14th. He'd return May 21st. "June 1st, I said. "I'll need it June 1st. I signed the lease that night, paid the deposit and first month's rent from my new bank account, the one Alexander didn't know existed. Meanwhile, I was quietly moving money. Not stealing, just taking what was mine. I'd been the primary earner for 6 of our 12 years together. My little design hobby had paid his student loans, covered our mortgage when he was between firms, funded his professional wardrobe. I calculated my contributions and transferred my half of our joint savings to my personal account in small increments that wouldn't trigger his attention. 2,000 here, 3,000 there, spread over weeks so it looked like regular expenses. By January, I'd moved $40,000. My money, my work. Claire kept asking if I was sure about this approach. Why not just confront him now? Why wait? Because he needs to think he won, I said. He needs to go on that trip thinking I'm sitting at home like an obedient wife, waiting for him to come back so we can work on our marriage or whatever story he's telling himself. He needs to feel safe and victorious. And then he gets to come home to consequences. In February, I met with Simone Blackwell. Claire had recommended her, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless in equal measure. Her office was in a high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and silver-framed glasses. I'd brought 3 binders, bank statements going back 5 years, credit card bills, email printouts, text message screenshots, location data, a timeline of Alexander's affair cross-referenced with charges to our joint account. Simone went through everything methodically, making notes, occasionally asking questions. When she finished, she sat back and looked at me with something like respect. "This is actually worse than it looks," she said. "Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, adultery, and the fact that you paid for a vacation you were deliberately excluded from using marital funds. We can argue marital asset misappropriation. Illinois is not a no-fault state. We can file based on adultery, and given this documentation, you'd have an airtight case." "I don't want to file yet," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Because he's leaving for Santorini in May. I want him to go on that trip. I want him to spend 5 days thinking he got away with all of this, and then I want him to come home to the consequences." Simone leaned back in her chair, studying me. "What exactly are you planning, Mrs. Thornton?" "Riley," I said, "and I'm planning to give him exactly what he thought he wanted. Time away from his clingy wife, a vacation with his mistress, freedom from the marriage he clearly doesn't value. And then I'm going to show him what that freedom actually costs." We spent 3 hours mapping strategy. Simone explained my rights, my leverage, the legal landscape of divorce in Illinois. We discussed timing, documentation, potential complications. By the time I left her office, I had a plan. Comprehensive, calculated, and completely legal. It would devastate Alexander in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But there was one more move to make. One that would either be brilliant or cross a line I couldn't uncross. In March, I called Alexander's law firm. "I need to speak with the managing partner," I told the receptionist. "It's regarding a professional matter that may impact the firm." I was transferred twice before a deep voice came on the line. "This is Richard Caldwell. How can I help you?" "Mr. Caldwell, this is Riley Thornton, Alexander Thornton's wife." "Oh, yes, Mrs. Thornton. What can I do for you?" I kept my voice calm, factual, stripped of emotion. "I'm calling to inform you of a situation involving my husband and a colleague, Vanessa Pierce. They've been conducting an affair, and I have reason to believe firm resources may have been used in ways that violate your ethics policies." Another pause, longer this time. "Those are serious allegations. I have documentation. Hotel rooms billed to client accounts. Dinners charged as business expenses that were actually personal. A pattern of behavior that blurs professional boundaries. Mrs. Thornton, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Though I should mention, this puts us in a delicate position regarding your husband's partnership review. I understand. I'm not trying to sabotage his career. I'm simply ensuring the firm has information relevant to its policies and practices. We'll open an investigation immediately. Thank you for your call. I hung up and sat there for a long moment, phone in my hand, feeling something between satisfaction and nausea. That evening, Alexander came home and I had dinner waiting. Chicken piccata this time, his second favorite meal. He kissed my forehead, automatic, distracted, and complained about a difficult day at work. I poured wine and listened and smiled, playing my role perfectly. Inside I was counting down. 43 days until he left for Santorini. 43 days until he thought he'd won. 50 days until he learned what he'd actually lost. The countdown continued through April. 30 days. 20. 10. Each day I played my role with increasing precision, watching Alexander move through our apartment like he owned not just the space but the future, completely unaware that both were already gone. On May 13th, the night before his departure, I made reservations at Alinea. Alexander looked surprised when I told him. That's expensive, Riley. Are you sure? It's a special occasion, I said. Your sister's wedding. I want to do something nice before you go. We hadn't been to Alinea since our 5th anniversary 7 years ago. Back then, Alexander had been between firms and we'd saved for months to afford it. Back when he still looked at me like I was someone he chose rather than someone he was stuck with. The restaurant was exactly as I remembered. All minimalist elegance and hushed voices, each course arriving like a small work of art. Edible helium balloons, Wagyu beef with accompaniments served on a custom silicone mat, dessert that involved liquid nitrogen and tabletop presentation. Alexander kept checking his phone between courses. Not even hiding it, just casually glancing down every few minutes, thumbs moving in quick responses. Everything okay? I asked, sipping wine that cost more per glass than most bottles. Just coordinating some last-minute stuff with the family, he said. You know how mom gets, right? His mother, not his mistress who'd be sharing his hotel room in less than 24 hours. I watched him across the table, really seeing him maybe for the first time in years. The small scar on his left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident. The way he still chewed the inside of his cheek when he was concentrating on his phone. The expensive watch I'd bought him for his 35th birthday, $800 I'd earned through a particularly demanding design project. This man I'd loved. This stranger I'd married. Are you really okay with not coming? He asked suddenly, setting down his phone. I know the situation isn't ideal. I met his eyes, held his gaze, let him see whatever he wanted to see there. I'm exactly where I need to be, Alexander. Relief flooded his face. I'm glad. I was worried you were still upset. I'm not upset. That much was true. He raised his wine glass. To family then. And to Nora's happiness. I lifted mine, crystal catching the low light. To getting exactly what you deserve. We clinked glasses. He smiled, completely missing the double meaning in my words, the careful precision of my phrasing. We finished the meal, 22 courses total, each more elaborate than the last. When the check came, I took it before Alexander could reach for it. Riley, let me. No, this is my treat. One last nice dinner before your trip. He didn't argue. He never argued when I offered to pay. $600. I put it on my credit card, my personal card that I'd been building up for months, the one that would be mine alone when the divorce finalized. One final time paying for something that benefited primarily him. The symmetry felt appropriate. We walked to the car through Chicago's spring evening, warm for mid-May, the city alive with people enjoying the weather. Alexander put his arm around my shoulders and I allowed it, already feeling myself detaching, already halfway gone. That night we slept in the same bed like we had for 12 years. He fell asleep quickly the way he always did, while I lay awake listening to him breathe and watching the ceiling fan circle slowly in the darkness. His alarm went off at 3:45 a.m. I got up with him, playing the supportive wife one final time. Made coffee in our expensive machine, the one he'd insisted we needed even though a basic coffee maker worked fine. Watched him shower and dress in travel clothes, pack his carry-on with practiced efficiency. Do you have your passport? I asked. He patted his jacket pocket. Got it. Chargers. Checked twice. I walked him to the door. The Uber was already waiting downstairs, the app notification glowing on his phone. Have an amazing time, I said. Give Nora my love. Tell everyone I'm sorry I couldn't make it. I will. He kissed my forehead, the gesture as automatic as breathing. I'll miss you. Try to relax this week, okay? Maybe book that spa day. Maybe I will. He grabbed his suitcase and I watched him walk down the hallway to the elevator. Watched him press the button, check his phone one more time. The elevator doors opened and he stepped inside, gave me a little wave as the doors closed. I stood there for a moment, listening to the mechanical hum of the elevator descending. Then I went back inside our apartment, my apartment for a few more hours and closed the door. It was 4:02 a.m. I showered, dressed, made myself breakfast I was too keyed up to eat. At 5 a.m. I started making calls. Everything's still on schedule? I asked the moving company. Yes ma'am, crew will be there at 9 sharp. The storage unit is ready? All set. Code is 4782 just like we discussed. At 6 a.m. I texted Simone. He just left. Everything's in motion. Her response came back immediately despite the early hour. I'll file the papers at 9 a.m. when the courthouse opens. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. I spent the next 3 hours doing a final walkthrough, taking pictures of every room, documenting the state of everything, making sure there was no question about what I was taking and what I was leaving. At 8:55 a.m., I heard the truck pull up outside. The moving crew was efficient and professional, 3 men who'd clearly done this 1,000 times. I'd paid extra for speed and discretion. This goes, I said, pointing to my grandmother's antique desk. This stays. The marble island, bolted to the floor, monument to Alexander's fiscal irresponsibility. These boxes to the truck, those boxes to storage. My design equipment, computer, tablet, printer, scanner. My clothes, my books. The few pieces of furniture I'd actually purchased with my own money before the marriage, when I'd had my own apartment and my own life. The framed photos came off the walls, leaving rectangular ghosts where they'd hung. Our wedding photo, anniversary trips, holiday celebrations with his family, all of it going into boxes, evidence of a life that looked happy from the outside but was rotten at its core. What about this? One of the movers pointed to the king bed with its expensive sheets and designer duvet. Leave it, he can sleep in the bed he made. By 2 p.m. the apartment looked gutted. Empty spaces where furniture had been, bare walls where art had hung. The kitchen still had its expensive appliances. I didn't need them, but all my cooking equipment was gone. The bathroom still had towels, his towels, but my toiletries had vanished. I saved my final act for last. I placed my wedding ring on the marble island, right in the center where it would be impossible to miss. The afternoon light caught the diamond, making it sparkle mockingly. Next to it I placed a manila envelope. Inside, divorce papers, already filed with the Cook County Circuit Court that morning. Bank statements with yellow highlighting showing every contribution I'd made over 12 years. $287,000 total, carefully calculated and documented. Printouts of text messages between Alexander and Vanessa, the most damning ones, the ones that showed premeditation and callousness. Credit card statements showing charges I could prove were for his affair. And on top a letter, handwritten on good stationery, my clearest penmanship. Alexander, by the time you read this you'll be back from Santorini. I hope you enjoyed your trip. I paid for it after all. You'll find divorce papers in this envelope. I filed for fault-based divorce this morning on grounds of adultery and financial misconduct. My attorney is Simone Blackwell. All future communication goes through her. Everything in this apartment is yours. I've taken only what I paid for, which, as you'll see from the highlighted bank statements, is most of what we accumulated during our marriage. I've left you the marble island. It seems fitting. I also thought you should know that I contacted your firm about your relationship with Vanessa Pierce. I believe they opened an ethics investigation. I'm not trying to sabotage your career. I simply felt they deserved to know how firm resources were being used. You called me clingy. You said Vanessa was everything I'm not. Sophisticated, ambitious, someone who fits into your world. You were absolutely right. I'm not sophisticated enough to conduct an affair while married. I'm not ambitious enough to build a career on someone else's money. I'm someone who knows her worth. By the way, I canceled your return flight. It seemed wasteful to pay for it twice. Don't contact me. Don't come to my new address. Don't try to explain or apologize. You made your choices. Now live with them. Riley. I placed my apartment keys on top of the letter, then stepped back to look at the scene. Ring, keys, envelope, all arranged on the marble that started everything. Perfect. I took one last look around the apartment. The empty living room where we'd hosted parties. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals. The bedroom where I'd slept beside him for 12 years. Never knowing I was sleeping next to someone capable of this level of deception. Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. Claire was waiting downstairs in her car. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. How do you feel? I thought about it, really considered the question. Light, I said finally, like I've been holding my breath for 12 years and I finally remembered how to breathe. My phone started buzzing. A number I didn't recognize. Then another. Then Eleanor's number which I'd forgotten to block. I turned it off and threw it in my bag. Take me home, I said to Claire. My real home. We drove to Wicker Park in comfortable silence, and when I walked into my studio apartment, my space, my sanctuary, my fresh start, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The first 2 days in my new studio were spent arranging and rearranging. Books alphabetized by author, then by color, then by size, until I finally accepted I was just trying to keep my hands busy. Claire brought over takeout, pad thai and spring rolls from the place we'd been going to since college, and we ate sitting on the floor because I hadn't bought a dining table yet. "Have you heard anything?" she asked, twirling noodles around her fork. "Not yet. He's probably still in the air. Or just landed. It's 8 hours ahead there? 9, I think." He studied my face. "You okay?" "I will be." On day 3 I was shelving design books when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. International code. Greek prefix. I almost didn't listen to the voicemail. Almost deleted it without playing it. But curiosity, or maybe something darker, something that wanted to hear his reaction, made me press play. Alexander's voice came through, and even through the tinny phone speaker, I could hear the barely leashed fury. "Riley, what did you do?" His words came fast, clipped. "My firm called. They're opening an investigation into me and Vanessa. She's losing it. We can't even enjoy this trip because my entire career is imploding. And you took half our savings? That's theft. You can't just..." The message cut off at 30 seconds, time limit reached. I stood there in my sunny studio, phone in hand, and played it again. This time I caught the details I'd missed. Background noise. Vanessa's voice, high and panicked, saying something about her position at the firm. The way Alexander's voice cracked slightly on imploding. The desperation underneath the anger. I played it a third time and then I deleted it. Made myself tea, chamomile, the kind that's supposed to be calming, and sat by my window looking out at the tree-lined street below. A woman walked past with 2 small dogs. A couple stood on the corner arguing about something, hands gesturing. Normal life continuing. And somewhere in Santorini, Alexander was watching his world collapse while surrounded by legendary sunsets and whitewashed buildings and that impossibly blue Aegean Sea. I imagined it. Him on the phone with the firm's managing partner, Vanessa pacing nearby, probably crying, her own career suddenly in jeopardy. The romantic getaway they'd planned, paid for with my money, thoroughly destroyed by consequences neither of them had seen coming. I waited for the guilt to arrive, the regret, the softening that would make me question what I'd done. It didn't come. Just a cold, clear sense of justice. He'd made choices. Now he got to live with them. I texted Simone, "He knows." Her response came back within seconds. "Good. Let him panic. Don't respond to any contact attempts. Let him sit in the uncertainty." I blocked the international number and finished my tea. The next morning Simone called. "The firm moved fast," she said without preamble. "They started their investigation on Monday like I told you they would. Preliminary findings are already damning." I put her on speaker and kept arranging my kitchen, spices in alphabetical order because apparently that's who I was now. Someone who alphabetized spices while her marriage burned down. How damning. They found a pattern. Dinners with Vanessa charged to client accounts as business development. Hotel rooms in cities where Alexander had no scheduled court appearances. Weekend trips to Milwaukee, Madison, even one to Minneapolis, all billed as case research, all coinciding with Vanessa having the same days off. So he was stealing from clients. Essentially, yes, misappropriating client funds for personal use. The senior partners are apparently livid. It's not just the affair. Law firms handle those quietly all the time. It's the financial impropriety, the potential liability if clients find out and start auditing their bills. I measured out coffee grounds with precise attention. What about Vanessa? She's under investigation too. They're treating her as complicit since she benefited from the mischarges. Her position at the firm is now very precarious. Simone paused. Alexander's attorney reached out yesterday. He wants to negotiate terms. No, Riley, no negotiations. He agrees to my terms or we go to trial. I'm not compromising on this. Just so you know, if we go to trial, everything becomes public record. His affair, the misappropriation, all of it. It could destroy what's left of his career. I poured water into the coffee maker and pressed start, watching it drip through. He should have thought about that before he decided to exclude his wife from a family vacation while planning to vacation with his mistress using marital funds. Simone was quiet for a moment. Then, "Okay, I'll inform his attorney, but be prepared, he might get desperate. Let him." Days 4 and 5 passed in a strange peaceful haze. I worked on client projects from my new studio space. Met Claire for lunch at a cafe I'd walked past 100 times but never tried. Started looking at furniture online. My phone stayed mostly quiet. I'd blocked Alexander's number, his attorney's number, the international number he'd called from. Eleanor tried once. A text that said simply "Riley, please call me," but I deleted it without responding. On day 6, May 19th, Nora texted. I'd kept her unblocked deliberately, curious what she'd say, how she'd react. The message came through mid-morning, a photo of the wedding venue, the famous Santorini caldera in the background, white buildings cascading down cliffs toward impossibly blue water. It should have been breathtaking, but the message that followed made the beauty irrelevant. My wedding day and I can barely look at my brother. He spent the whole week on his phone dealing with his firm, snapping at everyone, completely ruining the family dynamic. Mom is furious with him. Dad won't even speak to him. And Vanessa showed up. Did you know about her? And it's been so incredibly awkward. I wish you were here instead of them. I read it 3 times, feeling something twist in my chest. Not guilt exactly, but sadness. Genuine sadness that Nora's special day had been tainted. I typed carefully, I'm so sorry your day was affected, but Nora Alexander did this. Not me. I hope you can still find joy in marrying Thomas. You deserve happiness. Her response came quickly. I know. I do know. And I am happy to marry Thomas. But our family will never be the same after this. Alex has lost everyone's respect. Even Mom, who always defended him, can't defend this. I stared at that message for a long time. Career damage I'd anticipated. Financial consequences, yes. The divorce, obviously. But this, the slow, irreversible fracturing of his family relationships. This might be the most devastating consequence of all. Alexander had orchestrated my exclusion from his family's vacation to protect his affair. Instead, he'd ensured he'd never be fully welcome at family gatherings again. The irony was almost poetic. I wrote back, take care of yourself, Nora. Enjoy your honeymoon. And congratulations, truly. She sent back a heart emoji and nothing else. On day 7, May 21st, Alexander's scheduled return date, my phone started buzzing with notifications from Simone. Call me when you can. Interesting developments. I called immediately. What happened? Your husband discovered at the Athens airport this morning that his return flight was cancelled. I could hear the smile in Simone's voice. That was you, wasn't it? I arranged it weeks ago. Seemed wasteful to pay for it twice. Well, he's apparently been at the airport for 6 hours trying to book a last-minute flight home. Everything's either sold out or triple the normal price because it's peak season. His attorney has been sending increasingly frantic messages. I imagined it. Alexander at Athens International Airport, expensive luggage, rumpled clothes after a week in Greece, phone battery probably dying, desperately scrolling through flight options while the reality of his situation sank in fully. No flight home, no job security, no wife to come home to, no marriage to salvage. Just consequences piling up like unpaid bills. Where's Vanessa? According to his attorney, she booked her own return flight days ago. Flew out yesterday, left him to handle this alone. So much for sophisticated partnership. His attorney is pushing hard for mediation, Simone continued. Says Alexander is willing to be reasonable, wants to avoid the publicity of a trial. Tell him Alexander had 12 years to be reasonable. Tell him Alexander can agree to my terms or explain to a judge why he used marital funds to pay for a vacation with his mistress. His choice. You're sure about this? No room for negotiation. I looked around my studio, my space paid for with my money, filled with my things, holding only my future. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the hardwood floors. I've never been more sure of anything. After I hung up with Simone, I opened my laptop and pulled up a new project brief from a potential client. A boutique hotel in Milwaukee looking for a complete rebrand. Good money, creative freedom, work that excited me. My phone buzzed with another blocked number. I let it go to voicemail without checking. Somewhere over the Atlantic, or maybe still stranded in Athens, Alexander was probably panicking. Probably calling everyone he could think of, looking for someone to fix this, to make it better, to rescue him. But there was no rescue coming. Just the slow, inevitable reckoning of choices made and prices paid. I opened the project brief and started reading, already sketching logo concepts in the margins. My life was moving forward, his was imploding, and I felt nothing but the quiet satisfaction of watching justice unfold exactly as it should. 3 weeks passed. June arrived with Chicago humidity and long evenings that stretched toward 10 o'clock. I fell into routines. Morning coffee by the window, afternoons working on design projects, evening walks through Wicker Park's tree-lined streets. My new life had a rhythm that felt both foreign and right, like learning to write with my non-dominant hand. On a Thursday afternoon, I was at the Whole Foods 2 blocks from my studio, debating between 2 kinds of pasta, when I rounded the end cap of the organic section and nearly collided with Eleanor. Alexander's mother stopped short, grocery basket hanging from her arm, her expressions cycling through surprise, uncertainty, and something that looked like shame. For a moment neither of us spoke. "Riley," she said finally, her voice careful, like she was approaching something that might bolt. "I owe you an apology." My first instinct was to walk away, make an excuse, grab my pasta, check out quickly. But something in her face, genuine remorse, not the performative kind, made me stay. "You don't owe me anything, Eleanor." "I do." She set down her basket and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. I knew what Alexander was planning. About Santorini. About excluding you. The admission landed like a physical thing between us. "I told him it was wrong," she continued. "We argued about it, multiple times starting back in August. I told him he couldn't do that to you, couldn't make you pay for a vacation you weren't attending. But ultimately I stayed silent. I convinced myself he'd come to his senses before the trip, that he'd tell you, that he'd fix it. Why didn't you warn me?" The question came out quieter than I intended. Eleanor's face crumpled slightly. "He's my son. I kept thinking loyalty meant protecting him even when he was wrong. I didn't understand that real loyalty would have meant protecting you from him, or protecting him from his own worst choices by forcing him to face what he was doing." An elderly woman pushed her cart past us and we both shifted to give her room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the store a child was crying. "He didn't deserve you, Riley." Eleanor's voice broke on my name. "I see that now. I'm genuinely sorry I didn't see it sooner." I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but a softening. This woman who'd made passive-aggressive comments about my career for 12 years was standing in a grocery store admitting she'd been wrong. It couldn't have been easy. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Are you doing okay? I heard you moved to Wicker Park." "I'm doing well actually, better than I've been in a long time." Eleanor nodded, looking relieved. She picked up her basket again, hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, Alexander is not doing well, but that's his own doing. You take care of yourself, Riley. You deserve better than what my son gave you." She walked away before I could respond, disappearing around the corner toward produce. I stood there for a moment, pasta forgotten, processing the conversation. Not all of Alexander's family had chosen his side. That realization felt significant somehow, like a small piece of validation I hadn't known I needed. The next morning, Simone called while I was working on a logo concept for the Milwaukee hotel. "You're not going to believe this," she said without preamble. "Alexander's attorney just agreed to all your terms. No negotiations, no counters, complete acceptance." I set down my stylus. What happened? His position became untenable. The firm placed him on administrative leave 2 weeks ago. Their investigation found a pattern of billing personal expenses to client accounts. Every dinner with Vanessa, every hotel room, weekend trips, all of it charged inappropriately. He's facing possible termination and potential legal consequences if clients start auditing their bills. I walked to my window, phone pressed to my ear, watching a jogger pass below. Simone continued. "Without his income and with mounting legal fees for both the firm's investigation and the divorce, he can't afford to fight you. And frankly, the evidence you gathered is airtight. If this went to trial, everything would become public record. His career would be finished. Accepting your terms is his least bad option." "How soon can we finalize?" "Mid-July, maybe sooner. We're looking at 3 months from filing to finalization. That's nearly record time." After we hung up, I sat by my window for a long time. Alexander had wanted to exclude me from 1 week in Santorini. Instead, he'd lost 12 years of marriage, most of our shared assets, his career trajectory, and his family's respect. The math felt almost poetic in its precision. Over the following weeks, I heard updates through Claire, who heard them through the professional grapevine. Chicago's legal community was small and scandal traveled fast. Alexander hadn't been terminated, but the outcome was almost worse. Formal reprimand, mandatory ethics training, a permanent notation in his file that partnership was off the table. He'd remain an associate indefinitely, his career effectively capped at age 38. Several mentors at the firm had distanced themselves. No more lunches, no more sponsorship for high-profile cases. He'd become a liability, and in law firms, liabilities got quietly sidelined. Vanessa had transferred to the Boston office, a move that looked voluntary on paper but was reportedly strongly encouraged by senior partners who wanted to separate them and minimize further scandal. "He's living in Ravenswood now," Claire told me over coffee one Saturday. "Studio apartment above a laundromat. His car got repossessed last week. The man who'd said I wasn't sophisticated enough for his world now lived in a studio smaller than mine, working a job with no prospects, alone in a city where his reputation was permanently damaged. I waited for satisfaction to arrive, for triumph or vindication or the sweet taste of revenge. Instead I felt nothing. Just a kind of neutral acknowledgement that consequences existed and sometimes they actually arrived. Does that make me cold? I asked Claire. That I don't feel bad for him? She stirred her latte thoughtfully. I think it makes you healthy. He hurt you deliberately, systematically. You don't owe him sympathy. I don't take pleasure in it either though. I just don't care. That's called healing. 2 days later I got an email from Nora. Long, carefully written, clearly composed over multiple drafts. She explained that she and Alexander were effectively estranged now. The family was fractured, their parents disappointed, Aunt Patricia refusing to speak to him, holiday plans suddenly complicated by whether Alexander would even be invited. Her wedding memories, she wrote, were permanently tainted, not by my absence, but by Alexander's behavior and everything that had come to light afterward. I should have questioned his explanations, she wrote. I should have pushed back harder, called him out, insisted you be included. I'm sorry I wasn't a better sister-in-law. I'm sorry I let you be excluded from what should have been a family celebration. The email continued for several paragraphs, then ended with, I know we're technically not family anymore, but I hope we don't have to lose you entirely. You were always the best thing about Alexander. I read it 3 times, feeling something shift in my chest. That evening I wrote back, shorter than her email but genuine. Thank you for writing. I don't blame you for what happened. That was Alexander's choice, not yours. Family dynamics are complicated and you were put in an impossible position. I hope your marriage to Thomas is everything you deserve. I hope your memories of your wedding day aren't completely overshadowed by the chaos Alexander created. If you'd like to get coffee sometime, I'd enjoy that. Not because of Alexander, but because you've always been kind to me, and I could use more genuine friendships in my life. Take care, Riley. Her response came within 10 minutes. Coffee this Saturday? There's a place in Logan Square I love. My treat. Thank you for not cutting me out of your life. We met that Saturday at a cafe with mismatched furniture and art covering every wall. Nora arrived looking nervous, ordering an elaborate latte with oat milk and vanilla. We made awkward small talk for the first 15 minutes. Her honeymoon in Crete, my new studio, safe neutral territory. Then Nora set down her cup and said, I need you to know that what Alexander did isn't who our family is. It's not who I thought he was. I know. Mom and Dad have basically cut him off emotionally. Holiday invitations come with caveats now. His presence isn't guaranteed. Aunt Patricia calls him, that nephew I used to have. The whole family dynamic has shifted. I felt an unexpected pang, not for Alexander, but for the fracture I'd indirectly caused by refusing to quietly absorb betrayal. I'm sorry your family is dealing with this. Don't apologize. Nora's voice was firm. Alexander should be sorry. He made choices that hurt you and embarrassed all of us. The consequences are his to carry, not yours. We talked for 2 hours. About her new marriage, my design business, books we'd both read, restaurants we wanted to try. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, in ways it never had when Alexander was the connection between us. When we finally left, Nora hugged me tightly. I'm really glad you're okay, she said. And I hope we can stay friends. Actual friends, not just family by marriage obligation. Walking back to my studio, I realized something. In losing my marriage, I'd gained the freedom to choose my relationships based on genuine connection rather than duty. Not everyone from Alexander's world had to be excised from mine. Some bridges, unexpectedly, were worth keeping. Summer arrived in earnest after that coffee with Nora. Chicago transformed the way it does every June. Oppressive humidity giving way to perfect evenings. The city suddenly alive with street festivals and rooftop bars and people desperate to squeeze every moment from the short season. My design business exploded. There's no other word for it. Within 3 weeks of the divorce filing becoming semi-public knowledge, Chicago's professional community being what it was, I landed 3 major clients. First came the boutique hotel chain, 4 properties across the Midwest, all needing a complete rebrand. The owner, a woman named Diane who'd heard about my situation through a mutual contact, called me directly. I like working with people who know how to rebuild, she said during our initial meeting. You've got that energy. The project was substantial, $40,000 for the full package. Logo design, brand guidelines, website overhaul, print materials. The kind of work I used to dream about when I was taking small jobs to keep us afloat while Alexander chased partnership. Next came a tech startup's complete visual identity. Young founders, venture capital money, ambitious vision. They wanted something modern but approachable, professional but creative. Exactly my sweet spot. Then a non-profit focused on literacy programs reached out. Smaller budget but meaningful work. Fundraising campaign materials that would actually help kids learn to read. I raised my rates. Not dramatically, but enough to reflect my actual worth rather than the apologetic pricing I'd been using when I felt guilty about out-earning my lawyer husband. And nobody blinked. Nobody negotiated. They just said yes. You should hire help, Claire said one evening when she found me working at midnight, surrounded by mock-ups and coffee cups. I agreed. 2 days later I interviewed Maya, fresh out of design school, portfolio full of potential, enthusiastic without being naive. She reminded me of myself at 23, before I'd learned to make myself smaller to fit someone else's ego. I can offer you 20 hours a week to start, I told her, part-time but with the possibility of more as the business grows. Her face lit up. When can I start? I rented a small studio space 3 blocks from my apartment. Nothing fancy, just a converted storefront with good light, exposed brick, room for 2 desks and a meeting table. But it was mine. A place where work happened, separate from where life happened. The business grew organically after that. Word-of-mouth referrals, former clients recommending me to colleagues. The Milwaukee hotel project leading to inquiries from other hospitality groups. I realized something during those weeks of creative explosion. Alexander's dismissive attitude toward my little hobby had infected my own perception of my work. His constant subtle undermining, the way he'd check his phone when I talked about projects, the way he'd describe my work as cute to his colleagues, the way he'd suggest I should think about getting a real job when his own income fluctuated, had made me small. Without that voice in my head I could see clearly, I was genuinely talented. I'd been successful despite carrying him financially and emotionally. Now unencumbered I was thriving. The irony was sharp enough to cut. Alexander had wanted a sophisticated, ambitious partner like Vanessa. But I'd been ambitious all along, just not in ways he valued or recognized. My apartment transformed too. Slowly, deliberately, I turned it into something that felt entirely mine. I painted the accent wall behind my bed a deep, rich blue, the exact shade Alexander had vetoed 3 times when we discussed repainting the Lincoln Park bedroom. Too bold, he'd said. Too much. It was perfect. I filled the windowsills with plants, pothos and snake plants and a fiddle leaf fig that took up an entire corner. I hung art from local artists I discovered at neighborhood galleries. A print from a woman who did abstract cityscapes. A photograph of Lake Michigan at dawn. A small oil painting of a jazz club interior that reminded me of the place I'd started frequenting. I created a reading nook by the big window. A comfortable chair from a vintage shop, good lighting, a small table for tea. I'd sit there in the evenings with books I chose purely for my own interest, no longer trying to read the legal thrillers and business books Alexander preferred so we'd have something to discuss. I discovered I loved literary fiction, design history, memoirs by artists and architects. I cooked meals for one and learned that cooking could be a pleasure rather than an obligation. No more timing everything to be ready exactly when Alexander got home. No more catering to his preferences while ignoring my own. In mid-July, I hosted a small dinner party, just Claire and 2 other friends, but it felt significant. The Lincoln Park apartment had never felt quite mine, even after 12 years. I'd hosted there reluctantly, always anxious about whether the food was good enough, the space impressive enough. This felt different. Your place is so peaceful, one friend said, glass of wine in hand, standing by my plant-filled window. It feels like you. The old apartment always felt like a showroom, Claire added, like you were afraid to actually live in it. This feels lived in, loved. He was right. The Lincoln Park place had been about projecting an image. The image Alexander wanted of himself and his life. Successful lawyer, beautiful wife, expensive furniture, Marble Island. The studio was about comfort, creativity, joy. Smaller, simpler, and infinitely more satisfying. But despite the business success and the perfect apartment and the growing sense that I was building something real, I was still struggling with things I didn't want to admit to myself. Claire noticed, of course. You're doing great professionally, she said one evening. But how are you doing emotionally? I'm fine, Riley. I am. I'm better than I've been in years. Then why do you flinch every time your phone buzzes? Why do you check the street before leaving your building? Why did you have a panic attack last week when a client asked if you were married? I didn't have a good answer. See a therapist, Claire said gently. Not because you're broken, but because you went through something traumatic and you're allowed to process it with professional help. Dr. Patricia Chen's office was in a brownstone in Lincoln Park, which felt like tempting fate. But Claire had recommended her specifically, and the first available appointment was on a Thursday afternoon I had free. Dr. Chin was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with silver-framed glasses and a calm presence that immediately put me at ease. The first session I gave her the overview. Discovered husband's affair and deliberate exclusion from family vacation I'd paid for. Documented everything. Filed for divorce. Left while he was in Greece with his mistress. That's remarkably clear-headed, she observed. Most people in your situation act from emotion rather than strategy. I felt like I didn't have a choice. If I'd confronted him emotionally, he would have manipulated me. He was good at that. Tell me about that. The manipulation. And then I started crying. Really crying for the first time since the night in the car when everything had come out. I cried through that whole first session and halfway through the second. Why didn't I see it sooner? I asked during week 3. How did I miss so many signs? Dr. Chen's response shifted something fundamental in how I saw myself. You weren't missing signs, Riley. You were trusting your partner. That's not a failure. That's what you're supposed to do in a healthy relationship. The failure was his, not yours. He was actively working to deceive you. That's different from you failing to detect deception. We worked through patterns I'd developed over 12 years. The way I'd learned to manage Alexander's moods. The way I'd made myself smaller to make him feel bigger. The way his dismissiveness had gradually eroded my confidence in my own perceptions. You didn't seek revenge, Dr. Chin said during one session. You sought justice and accountability. Those are different things. That distinction mattered. It helped me reconcile what I'd done, the strategic dismantling of Alexander's lies, with who I wanted to be. On a Sunday afternoon in late July, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the Art Institute alone. Alexander had always found museums boring. We've seen it all before, he'd say whenever I suggested going. So I'd stopped suggesting. I spent 2 hours wandering galleries, ending up in front of the Chagall windows. The way the light came through the stained glass, transforming ordinary afternoon into something transcendent. I was completely absorbed when someone bumped into me. Oh God, I'm sorry, a man's voice said, his hand steadying my elbow. I wasn't watching where I was going. I turned. He was about my age, maybe slightly older, with kind eyes and an apologetic smile. Neither was I said, laughing. We started talking about Chagall's use of color, about how light transforms spaces. His name was Julian, an architect from Toronto in Chicago for a conference. We talked for 20 minutes that felt like 5. Easy conversation, genuine interest. None of the performance I'd grown so used to with Alexander. Would you like to get coffee later? He asked as we were parting. I'm only here for a few days, but I'd enjoy continuing this conversation. I surprised myself by saying yes. That evening we met at a cafe near Millennium Park. Talked about architecture and design, about cities we loved, about the way spaces make you feel things you can't quite articulate. He mentioned his recent divorce. Not bitterly but honestly, the way you talk about something difficult that you've processed enough to discuss without falling apart. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him. I should tell you, I said, I'm not sure I'm ready for anything, relationship-wise. Julian smiled. That's okay, neither am I really, but maybe we could stay in touch, see where things go without pressure. He flew back to Toronto 2 days later, but we texted occasionally. Light messages, funny observations, no expectations. It wasn't a romance. Maybe it never would be, but it was a reminder that good people existed, that connection was possible, that my capacity for trust wasn't permanently shattered, just carefully guarded. And that felt like healing too. July arrived with heat that shimmered off Chicago sidewalks and thunderstorms that rolled through in the late afternoons, dramatic and cleansing. I'd been texting with Julian for 3 weeks. Casual messages, no pressure, just 2 people who'd met by accident and enjoyed talking to each other. On a Thursday morning mid-month, I was at my studio workspace designing a logo for a farm-to-table restaurant when my phone rang. Simone's name on the screen. It's done, she said without preamble. You're officially divorced. The judge signed off this morning. I set down my stylus. That's it. 12 years of marriage legally dissolved. Papers will be mailed to you within a week. After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment. I'd expected to feel something dramatic. Relief or sadness or triumph or grief. Some big emotional response to match the significance of the moment. Instead I felt quiet, settled. Like closing a book after the final chapter and setting it back on the shelf. Acknowledging the story was complete. I walked to my studio window and looked out at summer in the city. Trees in full leaf, people walking dogs. A couple arguing on the corner about which way to go. Life continuing. Somewhere in Chicago, Alexander was receiving the same news. I wondered briefly what he was feeling. Rage, relief, regret. Then I realized I didn't actually care. That was the real marker of closure. Not hatred, not even indifference exactly, just the absence of preoccupation. He was no longer my concern, no longer taking up space in my thoughts. I texted Claire, "It's official." Her response came immediately, "Dinner tonight. My treat. We're celebrating." Celebrating what? A marriage ending? Oh, a life beginning. I smiled and went back to work. The logo needed refinement. The letter forms weren't quite balanced yet. This was my world now. Work I loved. Space that was mine. Choices made for myself alone. 2 weeks later, I had a client meeting downtown. A tech startup wanting to rebrand before their Series B funding round. The meeting went well. They loved my concepts, wanted to move forward immediately. I was walking back to the L, still buzzing from the success, when I saw him. Alexander was across the street, waiting at a crosswalk. Maybe 50 feet away, but unmistakable. It was the first time I'd seen him in person since that morning in May when he'd left for Santorini. 3 months ago. A lifetime ago. He looked diminished. That was the word that came to mind. Older, more worn, the confident bearing I remembered replaced by something hunched and uncertain. His suit needed pressing. His briefcase looked scuffed. He was checking his phone with the distracted intensity of someone waiting for news they don't want to receive. He hadn't seen me. I had a choice. Cross the street, say something, acknowledge this moment, or keep walking. I kept walking. There was nothing to say. No closure needed beyond what had already happened. Our marriage was over. The legal system had confirmed it. Standing on a downtown street making awkward conversation wouldn't change anything or mean anything. As I descended into the L station, I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual hurt, just blankness where he used to occupy space in my thoughts. On the train home, I thought about the Riley from a year ago. The woman standing at that marble island, trusting her husband, unaware that her life was about to detonate. That Riley felt like a different person. Not worse. Not naive exactly, but unfinished. The current Riley was complete in ways that only come from surviving betrayal and choosing yourself. I like this version better. Harder edged but also more authentic. More fully herself. Saturday morning, I met Nora for coffee. Our third meeting since that initial conversation, and the nervousness had faded into something easier. Almost like actual friendship. We met at a cafe in Lincoln Park. Neutral territory, neither of our neighborhoods. She arrived with wet hair and an apologetic smile. "Sorry I'm late. My shower took forever." "You're fine. I just got here." We ordered her usual elaborate latte, my simple Americano, and settled into a corner table. "So," Nora said, fidgeting with her cup, "I need to tell you something. About Alexander." My stomach tightened slightly. "Okay, he's really struggling. Like really struggling. He moved again last month, to an even smaller place in Rogers Park. His car got repossessed. The firm cut his salary. And," she hesitated, "he reached out to me last week asking if I thought you'd be willing to talk to him." "What did you tell him?" "I told him no, that you'd moved on and he needed to respect that." She met my eyes. "Was that okay? I didn't want to speak for you, but I also didn't want to put you in that position." "That was perfect. Thank you." Nora nodded, relief visible on her face. "I need you to know that what he did, all of it, isn't who our family is, or who I thought he was. We're all still processing it." "How are your parents?" "Mom feels guilty. She keeps saying she should have warned you. Dad is just disgusted. He barely speaks Alexander's name. Aunt Patricia calls him, that nephew I used to have." Nora's laugh was hollow. "Holiday plans are already getting complicated. Mom's trying to figure out how to do Thanksgiving without causing a scene." I felt an unexpected pang, not for Alexander, but for the fracture I'd caused by refusing to quietly absorb his betrayal. "I'm sorry your family is dealing with this," I said. "No." Nora's voice was firm. "Don't apologize. Alexander should be sorry. He made choices that hurt you and embarrassed all of us. The consequences are his to carry, not yours." We talked for 2 hours. About her marriage to Thomas, my business expansion, books we'd read, a new restaurant she wanted to try. The conversation flowed naturally, easily, in ways it never had when Alexander was the connection between us. When we finally left, Nora hugged me tightly. "I'm really glad you're okay," she said, "and I hope we can stay friends. Actual friends." Walking back to my apartment, I realized I wanted that too. Nora had become someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with, independent of any family obligation. Some things could be salvaged from the wreckage. Not everything had to be discarded. September arrived with that particular Chicago magic. Summer heat breaking into perfect autumn days, leaves just starting to turn, the city taking one last breath before the cold set in. 1 year. It had been exactly 1 year since that morning at the Marble Island when Alexander told me about Nora's wedding. I woke early, made espresso that was perfectly balanced now that I'd figured out the right grind setting, and sat by my window watching the neighborhood wake up. If I could go back and warn that Riley, the one standing in the kitchen trusting her husband unaware of what was coming, would I? The answer surprised me. I wasn't sure. The betrayal had been devastating. The months of discovery and strategic planning and divorce proceedings had been exhausting. The emotional toll was real. But the life I'd built from those ruins was better than the life I'd been living before. My business was thriving. I'd hired Maya full-time and was interviewing for a second assistant. My client roster included names that made other designers envious. My apartment felt like home in ways the Lincoln Park place never had. Every object in it chosen by me, for me, reflecting my actual taste rather than some projected image. I had genuine friendships, Claire obviously, but also Nora and a few other designers I'd met through professional groups. People I'd chosen rather than people I'd inherited through marriage. And Julian. We'd been talking regularly, texts and calls, a few video chats. He was coming to Chicago next month and we'd tentatively planned a weekend together. No pressure, just seeing where things went. I'd learned to trust my instincts again, to value myself, to recognize red flags I'd once overlooked. I was harder in some ways, more protective, more careful, but I was also more authentic, more confident, more fully realized. The revenge I'd taken, if that's what it was, didn't haunt me. Exposing Alexander's lies, ensuring he faced consequences, reclaiming my financial contributions. It had felt necessary. The price of self-respect. Alexander had lost his marriage, his career trajectory, his family's respect, his financial stability. I'd lost a marriage that was slowly destroying me, and I'd gained a life that was entirely mine. The trade didn't feel even. It felt like freedom. My phone buzzed. Julian, morning, thinking about you. Coffee later, I smiled and typed back, make it dinner. I know a place you'll love, I finished my espresso, opened my laptop and pulled up the project I'd been working on. A complete brand identity for a women's shelter, pro bono work that mattered. The Marble Island was in some apartment I no longer lived in a life I no longer recognized as mine. This morning, this work, this version of myself, this was what mattered now. And it wasn't just enough, it was everything. I'd paid for a trip I wasn't invited to and in return I'd gotten my life back. Best investment I'd ever made. If this story of calculated justice had you holding your breath, smash that like button right now. My favorite part was when Riley left that letter on the Marble Island with her wedding ring, knowing Alexander would find it after his romantic getaway. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.